Hey guys, it's Maggie and I am back today, and today I really wanted to dive deep on those questions, those things that people are really curious about when you say you've had your anus removed. I know that sounds pretty crazy, and you know why it sounds crazy? It's because it kind of is. It's a wild surgery to go through. I had mine done in December of 2019, and officially it was not just the anus being closed. It was my colon and rectum also being removed, so the whole surgery is called a Proctocolectomy. But I think the most wild and impactful part of this whole procedure on me personally was not having the anus anymore, because I actually did have some prior surgeries leading up to this that already altered my lifestyle quite a bit, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But before we get into that, I want to thank my sponsor of today's video, and that is Element. We always think of dehydration happening in the summer, but I feel like I struggle with it more in the wintertime, just because I'm not outside sweating. I feel like the urge of thirst is not that strong, and so I wind up being more dehydrated in the winter than I am in the summer. That is why whatever I drink really has to pack a punch. It has to work well. I have to absorb as much of it as possible, and that's exactly what Element does. They come in these convenient packets. They're a little powder that you place into your water, mix it up, and they taste really good. But the more important part of it is they provide you electrolytes, including 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 of potassium, and 60 of magnesium. And I find that that is the perfect balance of electrolytes to really be the most effective for me. I absorb the most out of it, and it makes me feel my best. They come in a variety of delicious flavors. They're vegan friendly, paleo friendly, gluten free, no ingredients that you have to worry about, and just overall really tasty, which helps increase your urge to want to drink. Element is kindly offering a free sample pack with any order of Element by going to my special link, drinkelement.com/LetsTalkIBD. That's DRINKELEMENT.com/LetsTalkIBD. Thank you so much to Element for sponsoring this video. Okay, let's jump into those really personal and intimate questions, the things people are really curious about with this wild surgery. I also want to mention that when you say something like this, you're like, I had my anus removed. People naturally are going to be very curious, and they're going to have questions that might seem inappropriate to some, but I really like to be frank about this. I like to talk about the intimate questions, the personal things, because not a lot of people do, okay? I really wanted videos like this when I was facing my surgery, and there wasn't a ton of patient experience online. That's why I like to talk about this. I could find a lot of technical articles and surgical videos about it, which were rough to look at prior. But there wasn't a lot of, patients out there just saying, hey, this is what I do during sex, so that's really why I like to talk about it. For those that are just popping along this video, they're like, what? What the heck does she not have anymore? The first question that really is thrown at me a lot is, how the heck do you go to the bathroom? How does that work? Do you sit on a toilet anymore? How do things come out of you? Totally valid. What I would like to say is, before I had my proctocolectomy surgery, actually about 10 years prior to it, I had some more surgeries, and those were the ones that actually, I had to adapt to a lot. Essentially what happened was my Crohn's disease, the reason I've had all of these surgeries, really attacked the end of my small intestine, which is called the ileum, as well as part of my colon. It created a lot of inflammation. It made some narrow spots called strictures, meaning my food really couldn't pass through the intestine well anymore. It was getting stuck. So they said, we're getting those pieces out. It was supposed to be an easy peasy surgery, few days of recovery, pretty straightforward, and it wound up not being that way. What happened was I was just not in a good state health-wise. The pieces that they had to sew together, if you imagine a garden hose and them taking a section out and trying to sew those pieces together, well, they didn't stay together. So everything that I had eaten spilled out into my abdominal cavity, or my peritoneal cavity. So I wound up with something called peritonitis that is deadly. I did not feel good, and I actually don't remember a lot of this, but I was brought back into the OR. They gave me a big old midline scar because they really had to open me up good to clean me out. And what they decided to do was take the colon that I had left and the small intestine, kind of where they split off from each other. They let the colon be, and they took the small intestine piece, the ileum, and they brought it through my abdominal cavity. So I actually have a little piece of intestine sticking out of my belly. That also sounds crazy to people, but you've probably heard the term colostomy. That's when somebody's colon has been brought through the abdominal wall. And that is how I go to the bathroom, because I have a lovely, lovely ostomy bag here. This is an adhesive plastic pouch that sticks to me and fills with stool throughout the day. That's how I go to the bathroom. Now, in the days where I was between ostomy surgery and my proctocolectomy surgery, where I still had that colon, I still had the rectum, and the anus was there, I still passed some mucus. Your colon actually produces a lot of mucus, and so I would occasionally sit on the toilet and pass that. I would have the urge to go to the bathroom, but then once I had proctocolectomy surgery, I don't know how else to describe it other than Barbie butt. That's another term that people often use, because there's a crack. There's no hole when you look. There's nothing in there. It's crazy to see, and I've gone back and forth in my mind about sharing what it actually looks like online. And I'm like, is that considered inappropriate? But at the same time, I know patients are they want to know what it looks like. I wanted to know what it looks like. I could not find a single picture online of somebody's scar. I don't know how to describe it other than it's like the hole just disappeared. So, yes, I do not sit on the toilet anymore to go. Number 2, I urinate the same way that I always have. There are urostomy pouches. There are urostomy stomas. That's a completely different surgery. In my case, my urinary tract was not impacted by this at all. And I pee the same old way I always have. I do want to dive a little bit deeper on the whole what does it look like thing, because that was something I wish I could have found a picture. I wanted to know what I would look like down there. Like, I was engaged at the time. I wasn't worried about finding somebody. My husband, he's well aware of all my surgical history and my disease, but I still, I wanted to make sure that I would look good, it might be a little vain, but that part of me, there is one person that could see it, and I wanted to know, am I going to look disfigured? I was really worried about that. Mine did not heal perfectly. It's just an area that has a lot of trouble healing because it's in a dark space. It tends to be a little bit harder to keep dry down there, and so it took about a year for the actual wound to heal completely, completely closed. There not be any tissue that you could see that was open. It drained for about 6 months. I had the surgery December of 2019, and I remember the morning of our wedding, which was October 10th, 2020. That's quite a ways away from my surgery. I was still sticking gauze up my butt, and I remember just thinking, it's my freaking wedding day, and I'm sticking gauze up my behind because this thing's still draining. It just took a lot of work for me to heal, and I've made videos about how I got mine to heal. It did require a little bit of help from my surgeon with silver nitrate, but honestly, I did most of the work at home, trying out products on my own, so I can link that somewhere if you're in that space right now and you're just like, this thing won't heal. It takes forever to heal, and I set myself up to prepare for that, but yeah, it still took longer than I thought. The funny thing is, people can't really tell. And when I say that, you're probably like, well, of course, you're wearing pants. Who the heck is going to see your non-existent anus? I get Brazilian waxes done. And I am fairly certain that if I didn't say anything, they likely would not pick up on it. Okay, they do your back. So maybe as they're really getting in there, they might be able to tell. But my incision did kind of open up, okay? It's called dehiscence. The wound kind of opened up a little bit, split a little bit. And so the actual scar there healed pretty deep in, and it almost appears as a hole itself. I do have a small skin bridge that happened because it split in 2 different sections, and then a little area in the center didn't split. It was kind of odd. It was very prominent to me, at least, until I gave birth. And now it's much flatter. I don't know what happened there, but it's way flatter, like less noticeable. The whole scar itself is a lot more flat since I gave birth. Curious, I don't know why that happened, but yeah. I made a joke to my OB when I was pregnant. There's a test that you have to get. It's Group B strep. It's a swab that you get around your anus. And I made a joke to my OB that I was thinking about maybe just not mentioning the fact I didn't have a hole down there anymore and just seeing if the nurse got on. I thought that would be kind of funny, but then I was like, no, I won't do that. So they actually, I think they did swab the area, but it was like just for, you know, whatever. For what the heck, why not? Let's do it. Let's also talk about the pain related with this surgery. Okay, the actual pain that I experienced, this is different for everybody. This whole experience is different for everybody, let's be real. But the pain that I experienced was it was really hard the first 24 hours. Actually, the night after surgery, I just remember being so afraid to move my body because I had real stitches. They did not do dissolvable because of my history with other incisions kind of opening up and splitting. Wound up splitting anyway, but they did real stitches, and it just, that is a really sensitive area. The skin is so sensitive, and I could feel every stitch pulling whenever I flipped myself over in bed. That was the hardest, but I kept reminding myself, the more IVs you get removed and you start taking oral medication and the more drains you get removed, because I did have a drain, I was like, you're just one step closer to feeling better. You're gonna get there. There might be some bumps in the road, but you're gonna get there. So that really helped me mentally. It was really uncomfortable, and really I wasn't allowed to sit for a while, like weeks and weeks. I was not really allowed to sit, so I used a half blown up waffle cushion where I could kind of distribute my weight back and forth. And that's how my wound actually split, how the incision split was, I believe it was 2 months after my surgery. It was February, the end of February, right before COVID kind of hit. I flew out to California from Pennsylvania. It's a 6-hour flight, and I had to sit in the airplane, and that wound up splitting my incision. I got there and I was like, I remember looking in the hotel mirror at my butt and like, that doesn't look good, it split. So I had to do some makeshift wound care. I think I brought all my stuff with me, but yeah, that's kind of how it wound up splitting, and it drained for months and months. But it wound up not being comfortable to sit, I would say, for probably 4 months, and then it started to regulate. I started to feel more and more normal, and honestly, now at this point, I would say there's no pain, thankfully. Some people do experience long-term pain. There can be some nerve damage and stuff, but I personally don't experience pain. Sometimes if my butt cheeks get spread a little too far, that can cause me a little bit of pain because it just feels like I'm ripping skin. It has torn a little bit, especially up near my tailbone, but that's because I had a fistula up there. It was more because of that than I think my actual surgery. The skin around where the anus used to be, I can still feel quite a bit. Like, it is still pretty sensitive. So if you're curious about that, that's my experience. I can still feel quite a bit of it. I cannot feel directly on the scar though. I would say the absolute most painful part of this entire process though was the actual removal of the stitches I had. That happened, I want to say a month after I had surgery. So I went through a month of just feeling like my skin was being torn apart. The relief after I had the stitches out it was so amazing. I felt so much better. But the actual getting the stitches out was the worst pain I have ever felt. And I did give birth. I had an epidural, but it wasn't perfectly effective. That was like, the only thing I can say is birth was so ongoing. It was an endurance thing. And then the stitches being removed was 10 minutes of really intense pain because it's just so sensitive back there. I don't even know. It was like somebody stabbing something really sharp into a sensitive area. Oh my God, it was awful. I feel like I'm pretty dignified when it comes to pain, and I will become quiet, and I will really try to center myself and breathe through it. I couldn't. I screamed. I screamed and I scared everybody in the office when they were doing it. I felt so ridiculous afterwards. I was like, I can't believe I screamed. The most wild part has been how confusing it is to your brain, because I don't want to compare this to an amputee's experience, because I cannot imagine how absolutely difficult and just how big of a, I don't know, weirdness on your brain that would be to feel a phantom limb. But there are phantom sensations and it's wild. I do have periods where I feel like I have to go to the bathroom. And it's like, why is that happening? There is literally nothing around there that would cause that. Well, that's not really the case. I actually find that when I get the phantom rectum, that's what we all call it, tends to be around my period. So when things are already irritated, maybe a little swollen in there, or nearby at least, and sometimes around when I ovulate, because I do sometimes get ovulation cramps. It's, what I do is I basically go sit in the bathroom. I sit on the toilet and act like something might happen. Obviously it doesn't, but it kind of helps my brain, like, pretend, okay, we went to the bathroom and now we're done. Hopefully the sensation goes away. It does help a little bit sometimes, but not always. And I also had sometimes in pelvic floor therapy where we would be working on the pelvic floor muscles and it would trigger the phantom rectum. I had that one time pretty severe, and I told my pelvic floor therapist, like, oh my God, I feel like I have to go to the bathroom really bad. And it lasted for about an hour and then it kind of dissipated. So that's been a wild one. What about just living life? Can I do things normally? Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is people ask about riding a bike. I actually don't think I've ridden a bike since surgery, but I don't see, I would not expect to have a different experience. Maybe the pressure of the seat would kind of split my butt cheeks again and kind of have that pulling feeling, but honestly, I don't think it would be that big of an issue. There might be some more cushioned bike seats that people use. I have never had any issue with anything like moving, exercising, walking around. Obviously, when it was earlier post-op, yes, I was very limited. Even walking up the stairs was really difficult because I had to just move one leg onto a stair and move that opposite leg to the same step and just kind of go like this rather than, you know, how you'd normally walk upstairs, because I didn't want to separate my legs too far. That everything was difficult, and I feel like I shuffled a lot when I walked because I'm just trying to keep my legs close together. But as things healed, you know, my range of motion completely went back to normal, and you can see I'm sitting on a couch right now, no issue. And this is, I would say, a pretty firm couch. Like I mentioned earlier though, the most helpful thing for me early on was sitting on a waffle cushion. You can look them up on Amazon. There's plenty of versions. They're fairly cheap, between like $10 and $20. We blew it up halfway. I actually had a friend, a nurse practitioner friend who worked in colorectal surgery. She recommended that to me. She said, fill it up halfway because then you can shift your weight and it's not placing so much pressure. The thing you don't want to use is use a donut cushion, because that can actually separate your cheeks. It can create a little bit of a like tension, pulling of the cheeks, which pulls the incision, and you want to avoid that. But waffle cushion is a great way to go. What about sex? What about intimacy and all of that? That was impacted pretty greatly for me. In ways that I didn't expect, and I've mentioned this so many times on my channel, but one thing I was not warned about prior to surgery is how much support your rectum actually gives to the vaginal wall. So when it's not there, things can get a little funky. Things can kind of pouch outwards, and so I had that issue. And I had a lot of pain because things felt very closed. And the reason things, I've kind of learned with a few different pelvic floor therapists, the reason things kind of felt closed for me, and I don't know how to say this in a nice way, but like really tight, was because the muscles were just trying to compensate for that support loss. So all the muscles in there were really tight. It made intimacy, intercourse really painful for me. I went to pelvic floor therapy. We kind of worked on those muscles and it helped a ton. It honestly made a world of difference. I did a little bit of work with dilators and things like that. That helped too. And I actually went through pelvic floor therapy a second time after birth because I had pain, but in a different way. So I always recommend that, whether you are male or female, to go to pelvic floor therapy when it comes to this surgery, because it really, really helps. A huge part of this is my husband. Zach was incredible through the entire thing, and he also was very into the care of it. He was the one dressing the wounds on my butt when I couldn't really turn to see it too well. So he had it right in his face, okay? He was not unfamiliar with the incision and all that. And he was just very supportive, slow with things, and he still is. When I had my recent pain after giving birth, he was so kind to me, and I explained that to my pelvic floor therapist, and I was kind of like, I don't know how people without an unsupportive partner, I don't know how they do this, because I feel like the communication Zach and I have, especially during those intimate moments, has been the most effective thing in making me feel better, because we're not pressuring me into stuff that I don't want to do. That is huge. He knows when I'm in pain, and he kind of knows what to do when the pain happens. People also love to ask, do I miss going to the bathroom? Do I miss all the things that go along with that? And I mean, yes and no. I think, especially when I have the phantom rectum where you feel like you have to go to the bathroom, but obviously nothing happens because you don't have an anus. Sometimes I just wish that I could, everything worked normal and you could sort of feel the relief of that. Does that make sense? But I also have to think back to all the trouble I had going to the bathroom prior to all my surgeries. I would spend so much time in the bathroom. I was the most well-read kid because of it. I had nothing better to do. Also, I read every, conditioner, lotion, package in the bathroom. I knew about all of my products because I got bored in there. I would say I don't miss it more than I miss it. Life is definitely better. And this is a surgery. I know I had the ostomy surgery back in 2009, and that gave me such an improvement on my quality of life. That was huge. But I wish I had done the proctocolectomy surgery sooner. I mean, hindsight is 20/20, of course. If I had known right after ostomy surgery how things would go with my colon and all the symptoms I'd have, because oh my God, the symptoms I was having, like that mucus buildup, I was having trouble passing the mucus because I also had a stricture in my rectum and anus, so it was having trouble passing. It was just, my colon was all inflamed. It made me feel very bloated in my belly. If I had known how things would work out, I wish I had done it earlier. The younger you are, I feel like the easier you heal. I was still fairly young when I had it done, so it wasn't a huge deal, but it really improved so many things for me because I was starting to spend a ton of time in the bathroom just trying to pass the mucus, and I just didn't feel good a lot of the time. And I would feel just like a chronic ache. I don't even know how to describe it because it's sort of different than the Crohn's pain I had always experienced, which felt sort of like burning. This was just this like heaviness, and the surgery alleviated that. And I have not been bloated basically since that surgery. I have felt so much better, and even though the incision was really hard to heal and that was a little bit of a uphill battle, I'm glad I did it. It's been a wild ride. It certainly has. And if you're curious about any of the other aspects of this surgery that I spoke about, like having an ostomy, I've got plenty of videos, so I'll link a few below if you're interested. But that's my experience, and those are the things people have definitely been the most curious about with not having an anus. I don't miss it in the least. I'm really sad my surgeon didn't save like the rectum in a jar. I really wanted it, but unfortunately they wouldn't do it. They had to send it down to the lab to make sure it wasn't cancerous, which it wasn't. We were good there, no dysplasia, but I really wanted it in a jar. Just so I could yell at it, Why did you have to be that way? Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you have any more questions about this surgery or any of the others, I'm happy to answer. And thank you so much to Element for sponsoring. All right, guys, I will see you in the next. Bye. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you are looking for a way to help support my channel, consider liking this video or even subscribing. You can also check out my store at LetsTalkIBD.shop. I have stickers and hoodies like these guys over here, just related to chronic illness and inflammatory bowel disease, something fun. And I also have a coupon code for my YouTube watchers. You could also become a member of my channel like the wonderful people scrolling on screen here. They've become a member and they have access to videos a little bit earlier. It's a great way to support my channel, and really, just watching my videos means the world. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next.